Welcome back to TGG Industries. Here we have lesson 5, where we'll be talking about Java repetitive loops and switches. Now in programming, sometimes you want to use a repetitive loop instead of writing code over and over again. For instance, if we wanted to iterate through an array, we would want to use a for loop. Likewise, if we want a user to be presented a menu until they make a selection, or an appropriate selection, we can use a while loop to say while this is true or while this is false, iterate through this. And then we can use switches. So the for loop has 3 statements, and it continues to iterate until the middle statement is evaluated as false. The initial statement 1 is ran initially when the for loop is started, and the last statement is ran at the end of every for loop cycle. The while loop will continue to iterate through the loop until the statement in the while is evaluated as false. And the switch will evaluate a variable based on different cases that are declared in the switch. And it also has a default case in case none of them match. So let's go ahead and take a look and create an application using these loops. So we'll start with a for loop. So we'll say for, and we'll declare our first statement, integer x equals 0. To end the first statement, use a semicolon. Then we'll say the second statement, x is less than 10. So every time x is less than 10, it will continue the loop. And the last statement, which will run at the end of every for loop, we want to increase x by 1, so we'll use x plus plus. Now the last statement, you do not have to put a semicolon. So we could theoretically run this and it would run just fine, but it wouldn't do anything. So just to show you how it kind of operates here, we're going to do a system print line, and we'll just print x, so you can see the values of x that as it runs through the application. It should run from 0 to 9. So let's run it. As you can see here, we output is 0 to 9. Because the last iteration, x was evaluated to be 10, x was greater than or equal, x was not less than 10, so it did not run the last system out. If we put x is less than or equal to 10, then it would have put 0 to 10. So let's go ahead and try that. And you can see this time it ran 0 through 10. So that's just a basic for loop. We could also use that to run through iterations of arrays, which we'll get further on once we talk about arrays. Our next condition here, we'll talk about while loops. So I'll comment these out for now, so that way we're only seeing one thing happen at a time here. So first we'll declare x again, x is equal to 0, and we'll say while x is less than 10, print out x. Now if we ran it right now, this loop would continue forever because x will always be less than 10. So in the loop itself, we need something that will increase x. So at the end of the loop, we'll go ahead and increase x. We could increase it any time. We could increase it before or after. So here, again, let's go ahead and run it. You'll see we have 0 through 9. Because on the 10th iteration, or the 11th actually, x is evaluated to be not less than 10, so it makes it false, and it doesn't print out the last line. So in a nutshell, there's a basic while loop. So let's comment that out. Notice I kept the x initiated above as an integer of equal to 0, because here I'm going to show you the cases. So, or the switches. So here we're going to use a switch. We're going to evaluate x, and you create the brackets. Now that creates a switch. Now we need to create the cases. Case 0, which means when x is equal to 0, we're going to say system.out.println x is equal to 0. And then you want to break the cycle of the switch. You don't want to continue on. We'll also do a case 10, just for demonstration purposes. X is equal to 10. Break. And let's do a default as well. So default, which is like the all encapsulating, it did not find anything else. And we're going to system X was not found in our switch. Break. Okay, so now we can go ahead and run our switch, and we should see that X is equal to 0, so our switch should say X is equal to 0. There it is. Now let's change X to 10, and you see the switch found that X is equal to 10 from our case 10, and outputted X was equal to 10. But let's make X 11, just for demonstration purposes. Our default should catch it, that it was not found in our switch. And sure enough, X was not found in our switch. So, what are some uses of the switch? Well, let's say the customer enters their state, and you want to verify the tax bracket of a state. So let's say we have, let's declare a double of state tax, and let's start off at 0, or let's start off at 10%. But each case has a different tax bracket. So if case is 0, our state tax can be equal to 4.5. Whereas if it's equal to 10, we can say that the state tax is equal to 5. And the default, we want to leave the state tax as 10. So now when we run the switch, the state tax will be set according to the information that was set through or declared through X, which is nice because then we don't have to sit there and try and manually pull information. We can use our switch to do that. We could also use arrays, and we'll get into that further on. But here are just some nice repetitive statements that we can use to run the application. Now as we continue on to gathering information from the individual using the input side of things, you'll start to see why for loops and while loops become into play and how beneficial they can be to scaling your application to usable means. So here today we talked about Java repetitive loops, switches, the for loop, and the while loop. On your own, you can research the do while loop, which does a certain function every time the while loop iterates as true.